COP29, leaders from small island nations came together to call for urgent action to combat the climate crisis. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres highlighted the grave injustices.
You have every right to be angry, and I am too. You are on the sharp end of a colossal injustice, an injustice that sees the very future of your islands threatened by rising seas. Your people pounded by record hurricanes, your economies torn apart, and development gains left in tatters. This is an injustice perpetrated by the few. The G20 accounts for around 80% of global emissions, and it is an injustice that must end. And we must get serious about loss and damage. The amount initially pledged is equivalent to the combined annual salaries of the 10 most well-paid footballers in the world. As I said, we must be serious about loss and damage. We need significant contributions flowing to the Loss and Damage Fund so it can have a meaningful impact, and namely a meaningful impact in seeds.
President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan also voiced his concern, pointing to the colonial legacy and its impact on small island nations already suffering from climate change.
Neocolonialism and climate change. The so-called overseas territories of France and Netherlands, particularly in the Caribbean and Pacific, are among the most severely impacted. Thank you. They are among the most severely impacted by climate change. Rising sea level, extreme weather events, biodiversity loss create serious threats to these regions. The voices of these communities are often brutally suppressed by the regimes in their metropolis.
Meanwhile, Philip Davis, Prime Minister of the Bahamas, pointed out that small island nations have a right to survival, urging the world to prioritise collective action. Following Davis' call for unity, President Hilda Heine of the Marshall Islands reiterated the critical role that the Paris Agreement is playing in a nation's survival.
I have traveled far to be here. I have done so because I continue to believe that the Paris Agreement holds the key to my country's future and to our planet's survival. But since faith is wavering, too many times our voices have been pushed to the margins. We are therefore grateful to our hosts for convening this gathering. I urge you to continue to ensure our ministers and negotiators are centrally involved all the way through this conference. We are the ones on the front lines of climate change.
The Small Island Developing States grouping, known as SIDS, consists of 39 states and 18 associate members. They are recognised by the United Nations as particularly vulnerable to rising water levels and more extreme weather due to global warming. The presidents of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan signed an agreement on strategic partnership to advance green energy cooperation. This is aimed at boosting renewable energy projects across the region. This is part of a broader effort to reduce Central Asian and South Caucasus carbon emissions and increase energy security. In a subsequent ceremony, the energy ministers of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan signed a programme for cooperation in green energy transmission with their Saudi Arabian counterpart. This will open the doors to investment, technological exchange and infrastructural development to support the goals of the initial agreement.
World leaders and key figures gathered at COP29 in Baku focusing on forging partnerships to fast-track the global net zero goal.
Esteemed fellow panelists,
Azerbaijan's economy minister Mikhail Jabarov emphasized the climate finance for an equitable energy shift. IMF's Kristalina Georgieva highlighted financial stability for climate resilience, and Fortescue CEO Andrew Forrest warned that fossil fuels pose a threat to life.
Measures are failing. Speaking to you as a scientist, we're whistling through 1.5 degrees, going to 2. If we thought Hurricane Milton was unusual, can I just say, yes, it wiped out $50 billion of beautiful infrastructure and homes, but if it hit further away in Mexico, which it could have so easily, it could have easily wiped out millions of people as well. You would have had stampede migration en masse. These are predictable events. These are not accidents of nature. Don't call them acts of God. They're acts of humanity. Predictable disasters which we can avoid if we stop burning fossil fuel.
Leaders agreed on removing political and technological barriers to ensure a just, inclusive climate transition.
During day 3 of COP29 in Baku, the World Leaders Climate Action Summit is hearing different viewpoints from countries participating in the conference. The Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, reminded leaders not to forget the here and now whilst looking at future goals.
Across Europe and across the world, our citizens are faced with unprecedented climate shocks. We need more resources to prepare, to respond in time in order to save lives and livelihoods, and to help people and communities rebuild after disaster. We cannot focus so much on 2050 that we forget 2024.
These remarks come after Central Europe experienced catastrophic floods in September, prompting the European Union to pledge billions of euros in support. The Greek Prime Minister also focused on the reality of adopting greener energy standards, urging governments to be more realistic in their approach to making a transition.
Europe and the world must be more honest about the trade-offs involved in the energy transition. Yes, the energy transition will, in the long run, lower costs, but this transition will not be painless. We need to ask hard questions about a path that goes very fast at the expense of our competitiveness, and a path that goes somewhat slower but allows our industry to adapt and to thrive. It is our responsibility to weigh these trade-offs carefully, not to whisk them away.
On Thursday, delegates at the Climate Change Summit will be focused on finance, investment, and trade.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif urged countries to move swiftly on the implementation of environmental actions. He made his speech in the COP29 climate summit held in Baku. He also highlighted what he calls Pakistan's deep suffering from climate change, recalling the devastating 2022 floods, and emphasized that Pakistan remains among the world's most vulnerable countries to climate-related disasters.
A country like Pakistan, which faced one of the most devastating floods out of climate change back in 2022, which left millions of people homeless. They were spending days and nights under open skies. Millions of acres of land in Pakistan submerged, and standing crops were completely destroyed. Millions of houses were absolutely submerged, and almost 1,700 people died. Pakistan is one of those countries which hardly contribute 0.5% of emissions, global emissions, and yet we are vulnerable and in the list of those 10 countries which can, God forbid, face this kind of devastation again. Ladies and gentlemen, we know the causes. We know the solutions. Now, we must find the courage to act and act swiftly. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni called for a balanced energy approach to use gas and biofuels alongside clean energy. She made the announcement at the COP29 climate summit in Baku. Meloni warned that being too idealistic could slow down climate progress and stressed keeping people's needs central. Meloni also pledged Italy's support for developing countries in this effort.
Reaching a valuable compromise requires sharing responsibilities and overcoming divisions between developed nations and emerging and developing economies. Italy intends to continue to do its own part. We are already allocating a large amount of the more than €4 billion budget of our climate fund to Africa, and we will continue to support initiatives such as the Green Climate Fund and the Loss and Damage Fund, as well as continue to promote the involvement of multilateral development banks. But it is equally a priority that the decarbonization takes into consideration our production and social systems sustainability. We must protect nature with man at its core. An approach that is too ideological and not pragmatic on this matter risks taking us off the road to success. Global GDP will double in the next decade. This will boost energy consumption, also considering the increasing demand for artificial intelligence development. We need a balanced energy mix to enhance the transition process. We must use all available technologies, not only renewables, but also gas, biofuels, hydrogen, CO2 capture, and in future, nuclear fusion.
On the sidelines of the third day of COP29 in Baku, another step towards expanding global nuclear energy capacity was made. A memorandum signed by the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, and the Energy Minister of Azerbaijan, Parviz Shahbazov, should allow for joint efforts on developing nuclear energy in Azerbaijan. More than 30 countries have joined the declaration to triple the world's nuclear energy output by 2050, which is a goal set out at the previous COP held in Dubai.
Welcome you in Baku during COP29.
At COP29, a debate on eco-colonialism highlighted the ongoing environmental damage to former French and Dutch colonies. The speakers discussed issues like illegal resource exploitation, deforestation, soil contamination, and the legacy of France's nuclear tests in French Polynesia, for which compensation remains unpaid.
I come from the beautiful 37-square-mile island in the Caribbean Sea named St. Martin that is partly colonized by the Netherlands and colonized by France. So we are 37 square miles, divided people by the administration in Europe, in the Caribbean Sea. So we are half Dutch, half French in our colonization. And we are here because of the great hospitality and the invitation of the Baku Initiative Group that has given us a platform to be able to share to the world our reality on the ground on colonialism. When you see Europe, when you see the Kingdom of the Netherlands, when you see the Republic of France, they say to the outside world that there are no colonies left in the world, that our territories are not colonies, that everybody has, and that is not the reality. While there may be some semblance of autonomy on certain aspects, on the ground, the reality of the colonized people that live in St. Martin, we cannot decide for ourselves how we recover from a hurricane, for example.
Speakers also addressed pollution from chlordane in Guadeloupe, nickel mining in New Caledonia, amongst others. The session called for France and the Netherlands to address these issues and meet the demands of affected communities.
I have 2 minutes and I've used 15 seconds on.
Imagine being forced out of your home, leaving everything behind, and finding yourself queuing up just to get a meal. This is the reality for hundreds of thousands of Nigerians who've been displaced by floods since September when a dam burst its walls due to heavy rain. Now, without proper shelter and a source of income, they find themselves waiting for food handouts at a camp set up by the World Food Programme. The food is received in buckets, but that's because each person represents a family, some having up to 8 children.
My eyes are just hurting from crying for so long that I cannot even cry again because of the situation that I found myself in. We rely solely on the food that we get here. There is a woman that is helping me because the queue is so long. She gave me her card so I can get food for my children and myself.
I used to eat 3 meals a day, but now I barely manage to eat once, and sometimes none at all. My children and I have been starving. The flood incident left us with no food. I have really suffered.
Even with the feeding program in place, food and resources are still scarce, as international donors are focused on other emergencies in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan.
We are really prioritizing the hungriest of the hungry. So the issue that we have is that we have resources just to go by, but the needs are outstripping the refunding that is there.
The floods have destroyed over 1 million hectares of cropland and affected more than 9 million people.
One of Indonesia's volcanoes continues to erupt, spewing ash. This follows explosive activity that sent lava streaming down the slopes of Mount Luatobo Laki on the Flores Islands since the 3rd of November. 12,000 people have had to evacuate their homes for safety, but some are fearful of what will happen.
I feel happy to be safe in the evacuation center, but I still have a sense of panic and trauma, especially hearing bad news about the situation in our village.
With ongoing outbursts, there could be more evacuations of people from their houses, according to local authorities.
So the amount of evacuees is fluctuating and it'll continue to change. For now, there are 12,283 evacuees at the centres. If the danger range rises again, the number of evacuees will definitely increase.
The Indonesian Volcanology Agency plans to expand the no-entry zone around the crater from 8 to 9 kilometres.
A flying car called the Land Aircraft Carrier made its debut at China's largest international air show. The latest in aviation and aerospace technology event is the 15th annual exhibition located in the southern part of the country. It's showcasing 225 items, with 68 making their first appearance. Visitors to the event can watch the aerobatics team fly 4 J-20 jets and see the new J-35A fighter jet.
We have seen so many J-16s, then Su-57s and some large helicopters like the Harbin Z-20 and also those from COMAC. We feel deeply moved. China's technological development is so fast, and we have also produced some products in this area and contributed to the country.
The show will run until the 17th of November.